The other day, I posted this video how I became a gay affirming evangelical Christian. Uh, one in the video, cited or referenced a statistic that 40% of evangelicals, according to one recent survey, are now gay affirming or affirm gay marriage. Is I must correct that. It's actually 38% in the specific poll that I was referencing. So you can find it at NPR News. News survey shows 67% of Americans support same-sex marriage and also referenced 38% of evangelical Christians. So that was from about 6 months ago or so. One of the responses I got several responses to the video, and in particular, a few responses to that statistic. And so one gentleman or lady said 40% of evangelicals, quote unquote, affirming homosexuality, even when granting your definition to support your premises, does not orthodoxy make? This individual says, I'm thinking of Athanasius, who, despite being in the minority, following the Council of Nicaea, stood firm in his opposition to the Arian heresy. With that being said, if popularity or at least a widespread adoption of a certain theological position reaches a certain magnitude, does that make the theological position more in line with orthodoxy? Would Athanasius's minority position grant him more credence in his position? Was the widespread adoption of Nicene theology what made it orthodoxy? I'm curious, as otherwise you are making a version of an argumentum ad populum fallacy. So, truth being simply a majority vote, you could put it that way. First of all, I'm engaging with this quote or this comment because that's just a substantive comment and it's well articulated. Other comments I get are like, "So you're affirming sin now, are you?" And those kinds of comments I'm just not going to bother to engage with. They're quite tiresome. As for this comment, so there's an important, I think, ambiguation in the comment. The claim is not and has never been that what the majority of people say about something is what makes it true. The claim, rather, is that orthodoxy, so let's define that word, orthodoxy, which is used here. Ortho in Greek means right, correct, or straight. Doxa, doxology, worship. So, in terms of rightness or straightness, if you want to straighten your teeth, you go to the orthodontist, right, to take your teeth and straighten them. If you want to have right or straight worship, that's orthodoxy. It is worshiping rightly. So that's what the concept of orthodoxy is. And embedded within the act of right worship is right belief. So orthodoxy has often just functioned to refer to right belief rather than to the more holistic conception of right worship. The claim is not that what right worship is somehow just a social construction of what people say or of what a majority of people say. But the reality is that our conception of what orthodoxy is with respect to different groups is always socially established. Whether you are talking about a mere Christian orthodoxy or a Roman Catholic orthodoxy or an evangelical orthodoxy or a Lutheran orthodoxy or a Pentecostal orthodoxy, all of these different conceptions of what is right worship and right belief embedded within that concept, within each one of these ecclesial communities, is going to be established through those communities, through the practices and beliefs and authorities recognized within those communities. If you want to talk about the abstraction of an evangelical identity specifically, of that subset of Christendom that is identifiable in some respect as evangelical, and you want to understand what orthodoxy is in that community, you both, as with all of these communities, you look both to formal designators as to what orthodoxy is, and also to practical on the ground realities as to what the beliefs and practices are. So that is just a reality here. Here's a really interesting one. So this comes from the Catholic News Agency. This is just a an article from a few months ago, sort of picking up the dog as usual. Timbit is interfering with my attempt to record a video. Um, it- Approximately 2 to 3% of sexually active Catholics practice natural family planning methods, which are the only officially endorsed, magisterially endorsed methods of family planning and quote unquote birth control in the Catholic Church. So uh, I was somewhat well versed in these different forms of family planning 25 years ago, 27 years ago now, when I did my master's thesis on birth control and the theology of birth control in the Roman Catholic Church. That's what I did my master's bioethics um, thesis on. I have like a 170 page master's thesis somewhere in. I don't even know if I have it anymore. I think I just had like one print copy somewhere. I know that Regent College would have a copy of it if you're interested. But in that, so I talked about, um, of course, the rhythm method and the basal temperature method and the mucus method and all these different methods of natural family planning that are approved by the Roman Catholic Church. Only about 2 to 3% of sexually active Roman Catholics actually follow the church's teaching, and like 96, 97% practice artificial forms of birth control, like using the pill or using barrier conception, sorry, contraception. And that's an interesting example of the sharpest possible delineation between what the Roman Catholic Church has taught in terms of Humanae Vitae in 1968, the encyclical that Pope Paul VI released, addressing specifically the issue of artificial birth control, and what Catholics on the ground practice. And within evangelicalism, there is something similar. The difference, and similar in the sense that there is now a growing minority of approximately 38, close to 40% of white evangelicals, at least, that are gay affirming in the United States and affirm gay marriage. The difference in evangelicalism as an identity is that there is no clear magisterial authority within evangelicalism to top down determine what evangelical orthodoxy is with respect to self-identifying evangelicals. And in the book, The Wideness of the Sea, I give my own account of how to give a top-down definition of what evangelical orthodoxy is, and then to show that with respect to that definition, in fact, being gay affirming is not in contradiction with that definition. But really, the point I was making by citing the fact that 38% of evangelicals are now affirming of gay marriage was not even about defining what orthodoxy is. Rather, it was about pointing out the need for psychological safety. You see, it's actually pretty surprising to hear that more than 1/3 of evangelicals sitting in the pew, or at least of white evangelicals, more than 1/3 of them affirm gay marriage. You would never think that, given the fierceness and the ferocity that is publicly on display within the evangelical community toward gay people and the LGBT community more generally. You would never think that more than 1/3 of evangelicals are in fact allies. So then you ask a very practical question. Why are we not aware of this? Why are we not aware practically that 38% of evangelicals are in fact affirming gay marriage? Why is that a shock? It's a shock because those people, for the most part, do not feel comfortable sharing with their evangelical neighbors sitting in the pew beside them the convictions that they will share with a pollster. Why is that? That is because there is a lack of psychological safety in evangelical communities. Evangelicals have been taught to keep their opinions to themselves on this issue because they know that if they start saying, you know what, actually, I affirm gay marriage, they're going to get all the same people that I referenced earlier saying, oh, so you approve of sin, which is not conducive to an open, vulnerable conversation in the mutual pursuit of truth. Rather, what it functionally says is it tells people to shut up and keep their opinions to themselves, which is what happens. And so recognizing that 38% of evangelicals are now gay affirming is a way of pointing out that you need to start having a conversation in public and allow the safety to have that conversation about this issue without fear of censure and unthinking people whose theological method consists of nothing more than counting up a select set of proof texts that have been handed down to them and saying that's what the Bible says on this matter. Mic drop. Let's move on to the next topic. That's not how it works. That's not actually how people form their theological beliefs, and that is not healthy. And it does not cultivate a community that is ostensibly concerned with the pursuit of truth. To conclude, I'm just going to come back to a point that I've often made that the word Israel comes from Jacob struggling through the night with the angel of the Lord and was given this name Israel because he had struggled with God. And that has become this central metaphor for God's people, this central symbol that to be God's people is to be willing to struggle and wrestle with God and with your understanding of the truth of what God has given to us. Part of that identity should be the willingness to welcome into Christian community conversations about difficult and challenging topics. And certainly this is preeminent among those. So it's probably going to be another couple of weeks before the wideness of the sea is released to the world. Um, if you have a closed mind on this topic and you think that it's just been settled by 7 proof texts from Leviticus, the story of Sodom, straight on through to Paul writing in Romans, First Corinthians, um, please give the book a chance, keep an open mind, and recognize that we are all pursuing truth and wrestling through the night with the angel of the Lord as we seek to understand and discern the divine will.